In 1969, Paul Ehrlich published The Population Bomb, a bestseller which argued that the population of the Earth was quickly outstripping its resources. He predicted increasing cycles of famine, disease, and poverty unless something was done to halt population growth. Such alarmist perspectives on world population often show a graph like this, with a very long period of slow population growth followed by a sudden spike after the Industrial Revolution. This is true. However, it also obscures current trends which suggest that population growth is likely to stop and possibly reverse by the end of this century. The trend towards lower fertility, or fewer children per woman, is part of a global phenomenon called the demographic transition, in which mortality rates fall, followed after a lag by fertility rates. The length of the lag determines how much the population grows before stabilizing. Much of the world is currently going through this lag, resulting in very rapid population growth indeed. But why does fertility decline? We know that it's related to economic and social change occurring with industrialization, but the exact mechanisms are hotly debated. Modern contraception can't be a primary cause, since fertility decline can occur without contraception and does not always occur with it. Most models of the demographic transition fall into three categories: risk models, economic models, and cultural models. Risk models emphasize the importance of reductions in the levels of risk and mortality. When children are less likely to die, people usually choose to have fewer. Important drivers of reduced risk include sewer systems and effective treatments for infectious disease. Economic models center on new motivations for people to invest in their children in hopes that they will achieve higher or more stable incomes. Key trends have been an increase in the importance of education, a switch from farming to factory work, then later to white-collar work, and large flows of labor migrants to rich countries and urban areas. Cultural models suggest that fertility behavior is primarily influenced by what people see around them, especially the behavior of high-status people. Important means of cultural transmission can include TV and other media, influence from teachers or peers, or direct teaching by health workers. Researchers have spent a lot of time saying why one model is right and others are wrong, but relatively little time rigorously comparing models. This begs the question, which of these potential causes is actually most important? This is also of practical importance given the enormous expenditures of time and money on population programs worldwide. So I'm currently conducting research in a country called Bangladesh, a comparatively poor country that has nonetheless undergone a rapid fertility decline in recent decades. In the rural area where I work, fertility has decreased from a high of 6.8 children per woman to 2.7 per children per woman in the last 40 years and is still declining. This area has been the target of health campaigns since the 60s. Mortality has fallen dramatically. Contraception has been provided since the 70s, along with, in some areas, messages promoting fertility reduction. Economic growth was slow until the 80s, but before that, population growth reduced land ownership, causing farmers to seek other employment. In 2010, I spent 6 months in Bangladesh collecting data to formally compare the risk, economic, and cultural models of fertility decline. My research assistants and I conducted 944 detailed interviews, including multiple measures for each model. We collected data and analyzed 12 different variables that the literature suggests should be indicators of the level of risk or mortality. Of those, only the listed variables had meaningful and independent effects on fertility, with the infant mortality rate being by far the most important, while more individual measures of health and mortality had smaller effects. Likewise, we collected and analyzed 13 indicators of economic motivations for fertility reduction. Of those, only the listed variables had independent effects, with the woman's level of education and land ownership having stronger effects than husband's occupation or income. Finally, we collected and analyzed 18 indicators. There we go. Finally, we collected and analyzed 18 indicators of the cultural transmission of low fertility norms. Of those, only the variables here had independent effects, with the woman's level of education, again, having the strongest effect, followed by level of media exposure. So, When we compare these models, what do we find? AIC weight is a measure of the relative evidence for each model, with higher being better. As you can see, almost all of the weight goes to the economic models, a small amount to cultural models, and almost nothing to risk models. So if this were a horse race, or perhaps a policy decision, you should place your money on the economic models. To get a more complete picture, however, we combined variables from each model, then tested different versions against each other to arrive at an overall best model. You can see that the variables included here are all from the economic and cultural models, suggesting an interaction between these two types of causes. This means that some variables may be important because they draw on multiple causal pathways. The best example is women's education, consistently the strongest predictor of fertility in our study and in many other studies. So more detailed analysis, including a path analysis, shows that while most of the effect of women's education comes through more economic kind of motivations, some of it is also due to cultural transmission of information women learn in school. So what does this mean for global population? Well, first, along with other studies, it suggests that a long-term rise in population is increasingly unlikely, even in relatively poor countries, as long as they experience economic change, which most of them are. Second, it suggests that exactly how large global population gets may depend most strongly on the speed and type of economic change. So what should we do or not do, assuming that we think it's our business to do anything? While we might be interested in reducing mortality for its own sake, that alone is unlikely to reduce fertility. Also, time and money spent on programs to culturally influence people to reduce their fertility may not always be the best investment, so we should choose carefully and test them before we use them. On the other hand, whether or not we think economic development is ideal in other regards, moves towards market economies have generally been, and will probably continue to be, very effective at motivating fertility reduction, whether or not we continue to be concerned about population. Thank you.